Several weeks ago, there was an announcement about one of the largest Yu-Gi-Oh deals in history. A syndicate of very high-profile collectors in the Yu-Gi-Oh community purchased over $250,000 worth of first edition Metal Raiders and LOB boxes. Now, by all accounts, the transaction was smooth. The boxes were legitimate. There was no funny business going on with this particular deal. However, I do believe there may be more to the story than people realize at first glance. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Parkside Merchant channel. I'm going to get straight down to the question in today's video. When you read between the tea leaves of this recent massive deal that was brokered in the Yu-Gi-Oh market, I think there's another lesson that comes out of this that's worth bearing in mind and worth thinking about. And just as context, folks, if you're unfamiliar with this deal, there are several very high-profile videos out there that you can watch. A whole bunch of these creators have videos about the recent deal, where you can get a lot of insight and visibility into what the transaction was like, what the whole deal process was, and how things went down. All very good videos that are very insightful and very informative for people that have an interest in this topic or in this deal. I should say as well that I was not personally involved at all in this transaction. I had absolutely no skin in the game. I have absolutely no familiarity with a lot of the specifics of the deal or the transaction. So this is purely from an outside perspective, just taking a very candid look at my assessment of the transaction. I'm not at all discrediting or discounting the validity or the authenticity of this transaction at all, right? This happened to be a very legitimate deal that went down under very legitimate circumstances. There was good verification and validation of the asset, right? And it was all clear, and it seems like everybody walked away happy and got what they wanted. But I do have an observation that I've been thinking about over the past several days that I felt like I wanted to make a video about, because I think this is a topic that deserves more airtime. So one of the things that struck me about this deal, among many other things, right? This was a huge moment in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! I've talked in some of my other videos about how the wilderness of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is still very much underexplored, how there still probably is a lot of sealed stuff out there, as well as raw cards that haven't yet been introduced into the market, and so on and so forth. But what really struck me about this transaction is that there were allegedly several high-profile investors in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community that voluntarily backed out of the syndicate of buyers that ultimately went through with this transaction. In other words, there were some very smart money, if you will, some very savvy people out there, unnamed, we don't know exactly who it was that backed out, but there were several people that stepped away from the deal before it went forward. And they allegedly did so under concerns around the price. So that, first of all, is a red flag, or at least a funky sort of a signal to me, that there was some dissonance or there was some disagreement among the smart money community about what to do with this deal and whether or not to move forward with it. And the second thing that struck me about it is just that there was reservation around this deal, right? And that it was primarily around price, but then you have to ask yourself, well, what drives an individual's willingness to pay? And it's usually things like trust in the authenticity of the product, the provenance of that product, the integrity of the box. To a degree, it's just the price, right? Is it fairly priced? So I guess for me, one of the takeaways from this massive deal, in my opinion, was not only that there's sealed inventory that's still out there that is legitimate, but also that the sealed market still suffers, and I would argue increasingly is suffering more and more from systemic issues. And those issues are around trust, integrity, provenance, knowing where that box came from and who's handled it and how it's been handled and all that sort of stuff. There is a gap in the market for some kind of an independent third party like PSA or Beckett that can do an analysis of a box, maybe even x-ray a box or take steps to assess whether or not a box is actually legitimate and true to the way that it was originally manufactured and packaged. This is partly why PSA is so popular, right, in the market. is because they can look at a Mickey Mantle card, or they can look at the Black Lotus and make a judgment about whether it is authentic, whether it's been fiddled with and doctored and altered, and make a qualification basically, or make an assessment on the authenticity of the card. This is why there are people that will tell you the LOB first edition Blue Eyes, Gem Mint 10, that card in a Gem Mint PSA 10 format may be worth more than the box, right? The LOB first edition box, depending on who's selling it and depending on how much insight you have into the authenticity or the legitimacy of that box. What I think was driving some of the apprehension among people in this particular deal, which is somebody comes out of the woodwork with two cases, a case of Metal Raiders and a case of LOB, just shows up out of the woodwork with all this stuff that's allegedly authentic. And again, it turned out that it actually was, right? But the backstory and the context and just the happenstance of it all causes some reason for pause. And what I feel like is happening increasingly as the price goes up for a lot of the sealed product is that the motivation for scammers, for resealers, for counterfeiters, for the people that are responsible for that Pokemon box that the collectibles guru broke open with those people at that live stream, right? Situations like that basically shake me to my core when it comes to whether or not I'd be willing to purchase a sealed box of Yu-Gi-Oh! From eBay, through some kind of a syndicate, or any of this stuff, right? It just feels like the incentive is too strong right now for people to do deceptive, dirty, crooked tricks when it comes to sealed product. So the sealed market kind of has two major challenges, in my opinion. The first is what I call the gambler's folly, right? Or the gambler's premium, which is sometimes people are willing to pay more for a box than they are for some of the chase cards from that box, partly because they just don't know what they're going to get out of the box, right? There's a thrill of breaking it open, of gambling your money, of not knowing what you're going to get, of maybe you're going to get an error and there's going to be two secrets in the box, right? Or some kind of unknown variable, right, that attracts people to that purchase. There's the thrill of the buy, the thrill of the gamble, if you will. That to me, from a smart money perspective or from an investment perspective, very, very suspect. I'd rather have the certainty that this stuff is authentic. I'd rather have the card slabbed, so there's no funny business. There's no chance that down the road I'm going to get burned if I open that box up and I find out that it's filled with stuff that's not what it is supposed to be, right? The second problem, and that's actually what it is the second problem, is this massive issue of counterfeits, fakes, reseals, scammers, crooked behaviors, right? And I feel like right now the incentive is getting very strong for people to be more and more crooked in dealing with sealed product. You see empty boxes of LOB and Metal Raiders sell like hotcakes on eBay. You got to assume that some of the people buying up those empty boxes are going to probably pull off some dirty tricks with those boxes down the road, or they may wind up in the hands of people that are going to do some dirty stuff with them. So I think the big takeaway then for this video is huge transaction, huge deal. I think it's something to be celebrated in the Yu-Gi-Oh community. I'm very happy for all the people involved that it turned out to be authentic, that they didn't get scammed, that there were no funny business, there was no gimmicks or anything like that. But I do think as well that this deal is a sobering reminder that there are very systemic flaws in the market for sealed inventory that would only be able to be addressed by a PSA or Beckett-like agency that could independently authenticate the validity of those boxes and the integrity of the box. That's a huge gap in the market today, and I think it's driving down some of the investor willingness to pay and the investor confidence around the sealed market relative to the prices that people are willing to pay for Gem Mint 10, slabbed, authenticated, no gimmicks, graded cards, right? Which is a very safe, relative to sealed sometimes, a very safe route for people that want certainty and want confidence that what they're buying is real and is not tampered with or meddled with or in any other way tinkered with that would damage its value in the longer term. So I think that's all here for this video, folks. Please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know down below, do you feel like I'm overreacting? Do you feel like I'm trying to read too deeply between the tea leaves here? It strikes me that there were people that walked away from this transaction that are some smart money investors, right? That's a big deal. That's a headline, in my opinion, that people walked away from this, because it says to me the sealed market has some room for improvement, essentially, when it comes to investor confidence. So that's it, folks. Once again, this is the Parkside Merchants channel. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.